What if I told you that one of the rarest and most powerful V8 engines in American racing history was built for one single, petty reason? Revenge. Not for speed, not for glory, for revenge against one man who dared to leave. This engine was designed in secret, built in just 90 days, and it actually won a real race. Then, almost overnight, it was crated up, hidden away, and forgotten forever. Today, only a handful of these engines still exist, and each one is worth more than most houses. So how did a company build a race-winning engine faster than most people plan a wedding, and then throw it all away on purpose? Stick around, because this story has betrayal, bruised egos, British engineering genius, and one of the strangest decisions in motorsport history. Welcome back to Modus, the channel where we dig up the forgotten machines, the secret prototypes, and the wild engineering stories that never made it into the history books everyone else talks about. If you love stories about cars that almost changed everything, you are exactly in the right place. Make sure you stick with us until the end, because this one gets crazy. Let's rewind to 1968. Richard Petty was not just a NASCAR driver. He was NASCAR. Fans called him the King, and for good reason. He had already won championships, he had thousands of loyal fans, and he was the face of Plymouth on the racetrack. But over at Ford, engineers were building something wild called the Torino Talladega, a car with a sloped, aerodynamic nose designed purely to cut through the air faster at high-speed superspeedways. Petty saw what Ford was cooking up, and he wanted the same advantage. He asked Plymouth to build him a winged car, something aerodynamic enough to compete. Plymouth said no. Maybe they thought it was too expensive. Maybe they didn't believe it was necessary yet. Whatever the reason, that single decision changed everything. Richard Petty, the biggest star in Plymouth's racing lineup, packed up and signed with Ford for the 1969 season. Now think about that for a second. Imagine you run a company, and your biggest star walks out the door to join your biggest rival. How would you react? Would you panic? Would you get angry? Would you try to build something even better to prove a point? Let me know in the comments what you would have done, because Chrysler's answer was honestly kind of brilliant and a little bit petty in the best way possible. Here is what happened. Petty had a NASCAR budget of around $250,000, which today would be worth well over $2 million. With Petty gone, that money was just sitting there, unused. Instead of throwing it into more NASCAR development, Chrysler executives decided to redirect that entire budget into something completely different: open-wheel Indy Car racing. This was a totally new arena for Plymouth. They had never seriously competed at the Indianapolis 500 level before, but they teamed up with Andy Granatelli, the legendary boss of STP Racing, a man known for chasing bold, unusual engineering ideas. Together, they set out to build an engine that could compete at the highest level of American open-wheel racing. And they gave themselves an insanely short deadline to do it. To pull this off, Plymouth needed serious expertise, and they found it in a British engineer named Harry Weslake. If you know anything about classic racing engines, this name should make your ears perk up. Westlake was known worldwide as a gas flow wizard, a specialist in how air and fuel move through an engine's cylinder heads. He had already worked on Jaguar's Le Mans winning engines, and he had designed cylinder heads used on Dan Gurney's Formula One car, the same car that won the 1967 Belgian Grand Prix. This was not some random hired hand. This was one of the sharpest minds in engine design at the time. Now here is the part that still amazes engineers today. Plymouth did not build a brand new engine completely from scratch. Instead, they took their humble, ordinary 318 cubic inch small block V8, the same basic engine used in everyday trucks and family sedans, and transformed it into a race car powerhouse. They shortened the stroke and reduced the bore to bring the displacement down to around 270 cubic inches, which was required to meet USAC racing regulations at the time. Then Westlake designed brand new dual overhead cam cylinder heads with 4 valves per cylinder, all cast in lightweight aluminum, paired with mechanical slide throttle fuel injection. This was a massive leap in complexity compared to the simple engine it started from. Running on methanol fuel, this high-revving monster produced somewhere between 500 and 540 horsepower at over 7,000 RPM. And they did all of this, starting from a grocery getter engine, in about 90 days. Design work began in February of 1969, and running engines were already being delivered by April. 90 days. Think about how long it takes most people just to get a permit for a home renovation. Does that timeline sound impressive to you? Or does it sound like a recipe for disaster? Honestly, it turned out to be a little bit of both. Because building an engine that fast comes with consequences. The mechanics working on this project actually gave it a nickname: the English patient. It was fragile, it was complicated, and with such a tight development window, there was very little time to properly test and refine every single part before it hit the track. The early races were rough. There were mechanical failures, there were chassis setup problems, since the car itself had to be adapted around this unusual new engine. There were pit lane disasters that cost the team valuable time and points. If you were an engineer on this project, watching your creation break down race after only 90 days of development, how would you keep your motivation up? That is the kind of pressure most of us never have to deal with in our jobs, and yet this team kept pushing forward. Then, on August 24th, 1969, everything changed for one single afternoon. The team headed to Dover, a track with a concrete oval surface that rewarded torque and quick throttle response, rather than pure top-end speed. This actually played right into the strengths of the little stock block-based engine. Driver Art Pollard delivered a smart, steady, calculated drive, and he crossed the finish line first, winning the Delaware 200. This was history. It marked the first, and to this day, the only Indy Car victory ever recorded by a Plymouth-powered engine. 90 days of chaos, breakdowns, and a nickname that basically meant fragile mess, and it all led to one real, undeniable victory. If that doesn't prove that persistence pays off, I don't know what does. You would think a victory like that would mean full speed-ahead investment into the program for years to come. Chrysler had just proven their engineering team could take an ordinary truck engine and turn it into an Indy Car race winner in under 3 months. This should have been the beginning of something huge. But instead, almost the opposite happened. Remember Richard Petty, the man whose departure started this whole story? Chrysler desperately wanted him back for the 1970 NASCAR season. To make that happen, they needed to give him exactly what he had originally asked for: an aerodynamic winged car. So Plymouth fast-tracked development of what would become one of the most iconic cars in NASCAR history, the Plymouth Superbird. Development of the Superbird required a massive amount of money and engineering resources, and Chrysler simply could not fund both programs at once. The choice was made almost overnight. Factory support for the Westlake Indy engine program was pulled. Parts stopped shipping. Engines that had just proven themselves on a real racetrack were literally crated up and put into storage. The very same rivalry that created this engine ended up being the reason it was killed off. So here it is a question worth sitting with. Was that the right call? On one hand, the Superbird became a legend, one of the most recognizable and valuable muscle cars ever built, and it did successfully lure Richard Petty back to Plymouth. On the other hand, an engine that had just won a real race, built by one of the greatest gas-flow engineers in the world, was abandoned before it ever got the chance to mature. What do you think Chrysler should have done? Would you have kept funding both projects, even if it meant spreading resources thin, or was killing the Indy program the smart business decision? What makes this story even more incredible today is just how rare these engines actually are. Historians and collectors estimate that somewhere between 5 and 10 complete Westlake Plymouth engines were ever built. Some sources suggest only a couple of complete examples are known to survive today, sitting in private collections and museums like the Museum of American Speed in Nebraska. Because there are so few left, surviving engines are considered priceless historic artifacts, with some estimates valuing them in the tens of thousands of dollars just for a bare engine, let alone a complete matching numbers race car. But the story does not completely end there. The high-velocity porting and cylinder head breathing technology that Harry Weslake pioneered on this project did not just disappear into storage crates along with the engines. Chrysler's engineers carried those lessons forward into the famous W2 series small block cylinder heads, which became legendary in drag racing throughout the 1970s. When you really step back and look at this whole story, it is wild to think about how much history was shaped by one driver deciding to switch teams. If Richard Petty had never left Plymouth for Ford, this entire engine might never have existed at all. It is honestly one of the strangest full-circle stories in American motorsport history, and most people have never even heard of it. So let me ask you this before we wrap up. Do you think Plymouth made the right call by shutting down a winning race program to fund the Superbird instead? And if you had a few $1 million and a legendary British engineer on speed dial, what forgotten engine or car from history would you want to bring back? Let me know down in the comments, because I really do read them, and some of the best video ideas on this channel have come straight from you guys. If you enjoy digging into this piece of hidden automotive history with me, do not forget to hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow and helps more people discover these forgotten stories. And if you are new here, go ahead and subscribe to Modus, because we bring you deep dives like this one all the time, covering the strange, the rare, and the almost forgotten machines that shaped the automotive world. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.